looking at species and what they're doing and their behavior and their habitat, it's a great indicator of what is happening in our world, what is happening in our oceans. Because people aren't constantly underwater and we're not as connected, I think, to a lot of marine habitats the same way we are to a lot of terrestrial habitats, we do tend to overlook them. There's around 500 shark species, and most of them we don't even know.
Hi everyone, this is your host Noveera, and welcome back to another amazing episode of Resilience Track podcast, where we follow the track of next generation of environmental leaders working to build a resilient future on Earth. So today, once again, we are joined by an amazing guest. She is a master's student in marine vertebrate ecology and conservation. She is also an SSI open water instructor and specialty instructor, dive master, and research driver intern, and many more. But I won't spill it all because I want to leave some for her. So without any further ado, please welcome Giulia Hettwer. Hi, Giulia, and welcome to the Resilience Tracks podcast.
Hi, thank you very much for having me.
So how are you doing?
I'm all right. I'm all right. Not too bad. I'm currently in the UK, which is where I'm doing my master's. It's pretty cold over here, but other than that, yeah, all good.
Okay, amazing. So please go ahead and tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Okay, sure. So, I'm Giulia. I am half Italian, half German. I grew up kind of moving around different countries. My parents, we moved around quite a lot. When I was 18, I started my bachelor's degree. I did this in liberal arts and sciences with a focus on environmental science, and that went for 4 years. And then I took a little bit of a gap, ended up doing my dive master, some marine conservation work, and then I decided that I wanted to do my master's. It was time to do my master's, and so now that is what I'm currently doing. It's a 1 year master's program in marine vertebrate ecology and conservation. And this is taking place in the UK, specifically over in Cornwall, so quite remote. But yeah, I'm loving it so far.
Okay, that's so amazing. Okay, so the first question that comes to my mind here is that what was like that pinpoint, or what was your source of inspiration for particularly choosing marine and vertebrate ecology conservation for the masters?
That's a great question. It's a question I get quite a lot. Like, why marine biology? Why the marine direction? Um, I think when I was younger, we lived near the ocean quite a lot, and so I grew up with that as a heavy influence. My parents also made sure that I watched every single David Attenborough documentary that there was out there when I was a kid. And I think I kind of fell in love with his documentaries about the ocean. Um, and I just started watching more and more documentaries about ocean science. And then I remember specifically I watched one about a shark conservationist, and I I think that's the moment where it clicked for me that what this woman was doing, I would love to do that for the rest of my life. And so I became really shark obsessed. um, and so I thought, okay, marine biology, that's like a great way to get into all of that. But then when I was researching master's programs, I found this one here, which is at the University of Exeter, and it's specifically in marine vertebrate conservation. And so everything just kind of lined up. And I thought, you know what, this sounds perfect. It's exactly kind of what I want to do in life. And then of course, like when you start scuba diving, you start seeing everything off of a TV screen and in your own way, and so that just solidified it even more for me.
Wow, that's such like an inspiring journey. I really love to hear. That's so interesting. Okay, so since you also mentioned that you're a research diver, so that means I'm sure you have done a lot of researches. So is there any one favorite research or any favorite underwater adventure that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, so when I was doing my dive master, this was in Indonesia, and my dive master, so it was the dive master training, but then at the same time, I was taking part in a marine conservation program over there. And so we did quite a lot of research dives. And those research dives, it was mainly first looking at coral health within that area. So we were taking surveys of corals, the coloring, kind of the health that it was in. And then we also did fish surveys. So we'd go down for a dive. Everyone would have like a little something to write on underwater, and then we would go ahead and we'd start counting the fish that we'd see, the size, depending on the species, also the gender of the fish. And so we that was really fun. I really enjoyed doing all of that. I can highly recommend to anyone if you're interested in like the marine conservation science to do like a short volunteer or internship program because it gives you so much experience. But I think research wise, that definitely was at the top. I mean, Indonesia is a great place to live, to dive. The health of the reef where we were in Raja Ampat, was incredible. And it was really nice and inspiring to see, because of how much damage we've done to our oceans and to a lot of coral reefs, it was really nice to see just how healthy the reef there was. And it's inspiring because it means that that's possible for reefs everywhere else as well. And I'm happy that like the research that I do there also contributes to efforts in conservation over there. So that's really nice to see. Now I get updates from the program that I did my dive master and research internship with, and I see the research that they're putting out, a lot of papers that are going out, and it's just really nice to see.
That's really nice. Okay, but you just mentioned damage here. That's actually what brings me to my next point. So when we talk about different threats to the vertebrate species and generally marine life, there's so many threats we come about, like climate change, there's ocean waste dumping, and then ocean mining, which I think that it's a big threat. So in your opinion, what is the major threat to this marine biota?
Ooh, I think this is a hard one because I think everything is so interlinked nowadays in the world. Climate change is a massive issue, but the thing is, if we're not tackling climate change, or if we do tackle climate change, plastic pollution is then still a problem. But the two are linked together because the more plastic we produce, the worse the climate change gets. And so focusing on one doesn't really affect the other. And I think that a lot of people are forgetting how interconnected all of the different problems are. When it comes to species that I'm specifically interested in, so sharks, for example, overfishing is a major threat. A lot of the world's sharks are being illegally fished, or actually in countries where it's still allowed, they're being legally fished and then either used for fins or for the skin, for the meat. But what a lot of people don't realize, I think, is how many are actually being caught every single day. And this is not just by targeted fishery, but also by bycatch. So, because they're such large animals, most of them, they get caught in all different types of nets very easily. And in a lot of countries now, they've also started putting up shark nets to kind of keep sharks out of specific areas. But in reality, what this is doing is just catching a lot of other different species other than sharks as well. And so for real like mega marine vertebrates, sharks, whales, dolphins, anything like that, these types of nets are really dangerous. And so I think for like marine vertebrates, like the bigger ones, yes, climate change is an issue because, of course, with climate change, ocean temperatures are changing, the feeding grounds are maybe moving, the breeding grounds are moving. They're realizing that they have to go further north because it gets warmer than it actually is supposed to be, so their food moves, so they move. But at the same time, bycatch with fishing is a huge problem. I think we see quite a lot of times these photos that come in of maybe dead whales caught in a net or something. I think there was a really powerful image a few month ago, I think, from a humpback whale, and it was the mother and the calf that were stuck in one of those long lines. And they'd been there for quite a few days, and unfortunately, both the mother and the calf ended up passing away. So that I would say is one of the major threats if we don't get our fishing industry in control and don't and we aren't careful about the type of fishing practices that we're using around the world, and we don't go back to more sustainable practices, we're going to end up having nothing left in our oceans.
I think I totally agree with that because yes, bycatch is a problem. Even in Pakistan, few last year there was a case that where a whale, a humpback whale, actually came to the shore of Karachi, and they couldn't rescue it in time. And just like that, you said it died as well, and that was really heartbreaking because we're not paying much attention to it. So also, like if you remember, in the mid of 2025, there was this thing that an anglerfish, deep sea creatures, they started showing up to the shore. It was very much circulated on the social media. So a lot of people regarded it as it was an indication of a maybe natural disaster or something like that. But because I'm not that much expert in marine ecology, I want to know from you, like, is it true that some marine species act as indicator species for natural disasters?
I think that species can definitely act, and we can learn a lot from these species because a lot what we don't realize, especially when it comes to deep sea, and I study vertebrates, but invertebrates specifically, we see that a lot of these species have developed senses that we don't we will never have. So we kind of tend to forget that the way that they live is very different than the way that we live, and the things that they see and sense is very different. So I think looking at species and what they're doing and their behavior and their habitat, it's a great indicator of what is happening in our world, what is happening in our oceans. I mean, with coral reefs, it's so easy to see when the water temperature rises. You don't even have to check because you can tell from the coral itself that something is changing in the environment. And the same can be said for most marine species. Um, if fish suddenly start moving their breeding grounds or their spawning grounds or their feeding grounds, it means that something has changed within that habitat to for them to not be going back to their original grounds. And so the same can be said for invertebrates. If they're moving, if they're coming up further than they actually should be with deep sea creatures, for example. So I think it's a great way to actually look at what's going on, and a great indicator of ecosystem and environmental health.
Yeah, I think that's why we can say that nature as a whole, it has a solution to every problem. We just need to study it to find it. Okay, so moving on to big technicalities of the research on the water. I just would love to know that when we go for terrestrial research, so we take samples. For example, for me, if I go to soil, because I'm studying soil sciences right now, so we take samples, we take containers, we bring in the lab, we analyze it through different instruments like gas chromatography, etc., and we get the result. So when you go for surveys underwater, how do you do that sampling?
It depends what you want to sample. So I personally have never taken an actual water sample myself. I've seen it done. Um, and it's not that different from what we do on land with terrestrial science, I think. There's a few considerations, of course, when you're maybe taking water from deeper down and you have to bring it back up to the surface. You want to make sure that that container is sealed so that you know you're getting the water from 30 meters and not the water from 10, because maybe there's something more specific that you want to study down at that depth. With other kind of samples, I mean, a lot of the surveys that I did was more, we weren't actually taking actual samples, we were more counting or taking pictures, videos. One of my favorite survey methods, and the thing that I really enjoyed when I was over in Indonesia, we used baited remote underwater video. And so they'd built this structure with a GoPro attached to it. And then at the front, there would be a little tube with some holes. And we would stick like fish heads or whatever fish they got off the fish market. They'd frozen it, and then we thawed it up the day before, put it in the tube, and then that entire structure we would take out with us on the boat. And a group of us would then go diving with it. We would dive down to the depth and to the location that we wanted to survey on that day, position the structure, and you wanted to make sure that in the video camera you were seeing half of the reef and half of the water, so that you are surveying both the more benthic species, so the species that are more towards the bottom, and then also whatever is up in the blue, in the pelagic zone. Um, we'd start the camera, give the bait a little shake so that the fish starts kind of diffusing out into the water, and it attracts predatory species, and then we'd leave for an hour. And what this allows us to do is it allows us to collect data without divers and human influence. And so we would leave, we would dive up, go back on the boat, we'd wait for an hour, and then we'd dive down and retrieve the structure and the camera and everything. And then after that, we'd upload the footage, and then we would watch through the footage and see what types of species, how long were they staying in that area around the bait. And on the videos that I got, it was really nice to see, because sometimes you see species that you don't see as a diver because they're really shy, or they're just not there during the time that you are, and so seeing those types of species is really nice. They'll show up. So we got quite a few big like grouper species, shark species, but the best thing is at the end of the year, the organization, they make a compilation video of all of the best species, or like the best videos. And so the organization has 3 different locations in Indonesia, and one of the locations is in quite a well-known manta ray hotspot. And so their videos, they see quite a lot of manta rays and different sharks showing up. They had a hammerhead show up one time on camera further out into the blue, so it was really hard to see. But it's things like this where we realize that there are species that we didn't maybe even think about that are in this habitat, that we then all of a sudden see that they're there. And so I think that sometimes sampling on land, it's a little bit easier because you can leave that camera there, you can go back and get it any time, whereas with underwater you might, I don't know, we always had to make sure that we knew where the structure is, so we had to tie off like a little buoy at the water surface so we knew where to go get it. We can't leave it down there that long. We don't know if other divers are gonna go pick it up or what'll happen with it, and then so there's always a few extra considerations, mainly because we can't stay in that habitat for as long as we can on land. But people have gotten really creative with how to actually gather data. So that's really, really nice to see and really interesting to see.
Wow, that was so interesting. I loved to know this because this was something that I didn't know, and I love how we're going for innovation as well. Like you said, that without actually sitting divers, now we're researching the oceans, because I think there's a whole world underwater that we don't know about. Like you can explore the land, but ocean we can't even reach that deep. So that's amazing. Okay, so you did an internship with Dive Master, and I was going through your profile, and you have actually done a project on mangrove conservation. So, can you explain a little bit about it?
So the area that I was in Indonesia wasn't as heavy on mangroves. We did a couple workshops of learning how mangroves are replanted in certain areas in the world, what the importance is of mangroves. I think a lot of people tend to focus more on the more charismatic species, so bigger things that we like whales, but we tend to forget a lot of the invertebrates, we tend to forget a lot of the plants that are also in water or around the coast, like mangroves, which can be which can provide really important ecosystem services. So with mangroves, the exact thing is that they actually can protect coastlines from erosion, they can protect coastlines from natural disasters, from hurricanes or tsunamis, because they have really strong roots. And so they keep the soil together really well, they keep the sand together really well. And so, for example, there's a lot of communities that will build their villages or whatever behind mangroves because of that known ecosystem service. And unfortunately, because in so many countries, people want to live directly on the coast, people want to build resorts and hotels and holiday homes directly on the coast, a lot of mangroves have been destroyed to make way for new development. And it's leading to more exposed coastlines in certain areas of the world. And so now there's a lot of projects that are replanting these mangroves in areas where they previously were, to make sure that that coastline regains a little bit of its health. And so we, in the area that I was, we didn't actually do any of the replanting ourselves. I know that on the other location from the organization, they were doing quite a lot of it, but we did do some workshops on learning how mangroves are replanted and what the importance of them is.
Yeah, I think it's amazing because in Pakistan as well, we have a lot of issue of mangrove degradation, and however, sadly, there's no replanting done here. But the issue is there. Like there was a survey recently, and about 20 to 30% decline in the mangrove cover was there. And I think mangroves are very important species. I also find them a little bit cute because they have like roots in the water and the head is on the outside. Look really fascinating. Okay, so now moving on to your diving adventure. So you're a diving instructor. So, for example, if I want to be a diver, so whenever you're teaching someone, what are some key instructions that you see? Like, oh, does that can that person be a diver? Like, you have to consider the body weight or your respiration capacity or something like that. What you have to keep in mind.
I think anyone, if they really want to, can be a diver. We teach I've had children from the age of 8 that have gone diving with me. I've had adults up to the age of 70, 80. Um, and so it really, I think it just depends on how much you actually want it and how much you actually want to be underwater and go for a dive. There aren't any, I mean, I don't think there's really many considerations there that have to do with body weight or respiration rate. You do have to consider other health conditions, and whenever we do teach someone, they do need, if they do have any previous health issues, they do need to go get it signed off by a doctor. So everyone before doing any course in diving has to fill out a medical form, and that form will ask a lot of questions about, for example, heart health or lung health, or if you've had any surgeries in the past year or two. And so if you answer yes to any of those questions, you do have to go and get a doctor's note. But in most cases, even with certain health issues, diving in some form, in some capacity, is possible. It does really depend on the individual, um, and that individual with health issues to, and the doctor, obviously, what that doctor thinks, to kind of decide whether that individual is right. And that's not a decision that we as dive instructors make, that's a decision that the doctor and the medical team makes. So I think if anyone is interested in diving, there are, you don't need to dive right into like getting your first official um, open water certification. That's like a 3 or 4 day certification, and that is permanent. That's for life. You get to go diving wherever, at any dive center with that certification. There are other things that you can do beforehand to find out if you even like diving, because you might not. It might not be for you. You might, some people get claustrophobic underwater, and I completely understand, because it is weird. It's very strange breathing underwater when that is something that we are really not built to do. So there's other options. For example, the real basic one with SSI, which is the organization that I'm certified with, Scuba Schools International. They do try dives. So this is half a day, maybe, depending on the scuba school that you do it with or the dive center that you do it with. And the instructor basically just takes you to a depth of up to 5 meters, explains the basics of diving. You get help with putting on the equipment and everything, and you just get to go for a try dive with the instructor directly next to you, helping you at every single step. If you want to do a step more, there's the basic diver, and that is valid for 6 months, and that can take you up to 12 meters with an instructor. And again, that's like a day kind of course. You learn really the basics of diving, a little bit of like the dive physics, what happens to our bodies when we're under all of that pressure underwater, some of the equipment basics. But then you just get to go and have a nice, fun dive. You do with all of like the dive courses, the ones that are further on, you have to do some skills. And so with the basic diver, you do a few basic skills before you get to go on a dive. So those skills, it could be removing the regulator, which is the way that we're breathing underwater, removing it from your mouth and putting it back in, and then purging it of whatever water is left in, or maybe removing a little bit of water from your mask, because if you do get water under your mask and you're diving, you're not going to be able to go all the way back up to the surface to just remove that water. You need to find a way of doing it underwater. And so it's just these basic skills that you then practice, and then you get to go on a nice fun dive, and depending on where you are, you get to see really really interesting species.
I loved that. I can, after hearing this, I do want to try at least once in my life and kind of like see the species because it sounds really fascinating to see that. And also, like, I just got a question in my mind. So, because you're underwater, you're with the aquatic life, there are sharks and there are whales and small fish as well. So, how do you like try to go unnoticed? Like, how do you ensure your safety? Because they're animals, they can attack you. For example, a shark can attack you sometimes.
Mhm.
So, how do you make sure that, oh, you're safe?
I think you need to respect the wildlife as much as it respects you. In reality, I don't think they pay that much attention to us when we are down there if we keep our distance. The main thing that I always tell people is it's so important not to touch anything, because they don't want to be touched by you, and you probably also don't want to touch them because a lot of them are poisonous or have spines or teeth. And so I think the most important thing is just to really make sure that you're being respectful of your environment the same way you'd be respectful on land. I think a lot of the time we think just because we can get so close to something that we have to do it, and that's usually what gets humans in these dangerous situations, is that we don't respect the wildlife that we are around. And I see this a lot with sharks. And I think people have this huge misconception of sharks, that they're vicious animals and they're going to come and attack you immediately if they see you underwater. And that's not the case at all. I've been diving with sharks quite a lot, and I've never had any issues. If anything, they're more scared of us because we're new and we're in an environment that they've never seen us there before. And so they tend to just want to be left alone, the same way that you want to be left alone when you're in your home, really. So, I mean, I think a lot of times people forget that that is their habitat. They live there. And the same way we wouldn't want a random stranger coming into our house and trying to touch us, they don't want us coming into their home and trying to touch them.
I kind of love how you said that because I, including me, I had that misconception that sharks are scary and they're going to come attack you because that's just the perception that we have been built with. So I'm really
It is,
glad
yeah.
that you cleared it out for so many people out there. Okay, so are there any particular challenges that you often face during the diving or like any big challenge that you once faced and you overcome that you might want to share with us?
Ooh, challenges. I think diving isn't as simple, I think, as people think it is. It's not just, oh, you're breathing underwater from a tank. There's all of the pressure, and the pressure changes every meter that you're going down. And so your body is having to put up with it. You also have a limited amount of oxygen. and of air that you can breathe, because that tank that you're breathing from is going to run out at some point. So I don't know if I've had any big challenges underwater. I had quite a lot of issues with my ears when I first started diving because of the pressure change. Our like air spaces in our ears are very affected by those big pressure changes, and a lot of people do struggle with their ears. And it's kind of the same pressure or pain that we feel when we're landing from an air like in an airplane. So a lot of the times when we teach people what to do in situations with their ears, it's the same way that you would kind of clear up your ears in an airplane, swallowing or wiggling your jaw or closing your nose and then blowing very gently against your nose. But I had a lot of issues when I first started diving. There was a few times where I went down to about 2 meters and then I couldn't get further because my ears were just in so much pain that I had to say, I can't go on this dive. I'll have to try again later. And that's absolutely okay. I think a lot of times divers think, oh, they need to do the dive. They're already underwater. It's going to be bad for everyone if they abort the dive or stop the dive. And that's not the case because diving is supposed to be fun. You're not supposed to be in pain during it. And so I think that's the most important thing for people to realize is to listen to their body. And if your body is telling you that something is wrong, listen to it and actually, pay attention to what is going on in your body. And so the times where my ears hurt, sometimes, yeah, the pain went away after a couple of minutes and I could continue the dive, but on certain days it didn't. And that's when I knew, okay, my body just wasn't ready for that dive and it wasn't meant to happen that day.
Okay, that's really good to know that you need to take care of your body itself. You don't need to force things on yourself. So that's really good to know. Okay, so now kind of moving back to the marine ecosystem, like the marine vertebrates.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about conservation, this is my point of view. Just I think that marine ecosystems are often overlooked. We don't pay as much attention to marine conservation. If I consider about my country, for example, then we go for terrestrial. Like there are very less laws made for protection of marine species. Very less. Like we have only one fisheries act in Pakistan for
Mm-hmm.
overhunting of the fishes. Otherwise, there is no. So, what's your viewpoint on that? Do you also think that marine systems are overlooked and there is a weak legislation in this case, or do you disagree with it?
I do agree. I think a lot of times because people aren't constantly underwater and we're not as connected, I think, to a lot of marine habitats the same way we are to a lot of terrestrial habitats, we do tend to overlook them. And one of the main things that we see is the amount of protected areas that we have on land versus the amount of protected areas that we have in the ocean. And so this has improved a lot over the last 10 years. There's a lot more organizations that are trying to get more marine protected areas enforced and put in place in a lot of countries. But for a really long time, the issue was that because terrestrially it's easy to protect an area because that area is under one government. It's in a country, that one country is responsible for it, and that's in most cases, that's how it works. But in the ocean, we only have so much ocean that is covered by a certain country and that country's legislation. And then we have all of the high seas, so all of the international waters. And that was very difficult to regulate what actually goes on in those high seas because which country is responsible if a law is broken out there? Which country is responsible for making sure that certain laws are put in place? And luckily now the High Seas Treaty is coming into effect, and hopefully we'll see a lot of changes the next couple of years with that. But that was a big issue in the past. I think also a lot of times that we in the marine world tend to focus on coral reefs because they're pretty and a lot of species live there. And that is true. 25% of all marine species live on coral reefs, whereas coral reefs only make up a very small percentage of actual ocean habitat. But we forget other habitats. We forget the deep sea. We're still allowing deep sea mining in a lot of places, and deep sea mines are being built now for future deep sea mining. And so we forget that habitat because we don't see it and we're not as connected with it. We forget that there's a lot of kelp forests, for example, that maybe aren't as protected as a lot of coral reefs, but they're really important for the ecosystem. One of the main kelp forests that I think are shown in videos are the ones in South Africa. And they're a really important ecosystem for a lot of different species down there. There's a lot of seals and sea otters and sharks that will hunt through those kelp forests, and they're really important for climate change as well because they store carbon dioxide. So I think we forget all of these habitats, maybe because they're not as interesting to us. But now, the last couple of years, there has been more of an effort made to protect these certain areas. One of the main things that is happening, there's a really great marine scientist. His name's Enrique Sella. He works for National Geographic. And he, a couple of years ago, started this program called Pristine Seas. And with this program, he has gotten some of the most preserved areas in the ocean made into protected areas. And there's some really great documentaries by him on National Geographic that I highly recommend if people are interested in learning more about protecting areas that are maybe very far away from us or that are still in quite a good and healthy condition.
Would definitely love to see this documentary, and I would also try and look it up and look at it because yes, I also think that now slowly people are moving towards marine biology as well. Like before, if I go when I was doing my bachelor's in environmental science, I barely knew about marine sciences that much, but now with the passage of time, people are looking at it. Marine sciences is emerging, even like in the underdeveloping countries or the developing countries, people are moving towards this as well. And I think one of the reasons is also because of the accessibility. You can't go that much deep underwater, so there's very few people who are actually willing to dive, which is why I have huge respect for you because you're actually going down there and kind of trying to protect something that we are destroying as actually as humans. That's amazing. Okay, so we learned so much from you, and there's so much to talk, but then we also have a time limit. So we have this mini segment
Mm-hmm.
that we do. So it's like a rapid fire round. There are two options you can choose from. So
Mm-hmm.
one is the conservation hot take. So it is basically any controversial thought that you have regarding conservation. You feel like people won't agree to this, but you agree to that. And
Mm-hmm.
the second one is moment of nature. So it's just any message regarding the protection of nature and environment in general that you want to give to the people. So which one you want to go for?
I'll do the second option. I don't feel like I have that many controversial opinions in conservation. I feel like mine are very mainstream, so I'll do the second.
Sure, no problem. Would love to hear you that. So go ahead.
I think my main thing and the main thing that I want to work with is sharks, and I feel like I've brought them up a lot in the last 30 minutes, but it's because I think it's important and they're so misrepresented and people really don't understand them as a species, and there are so many species. That's the thing. When we think shark, we think great white and we think jaws, or we think tiger sharks and bull sharks. But there's around 500 shark species, and most of them we don't even know. And so it's sad to think that an entire group of species has been misrepresented to the point where we are so scared that we're killing them all off. And I think a lot of people need to start seeing past all of these movies that have been made. So Jaws is a really great example. I'm a huge fan of the woman who filmed the scenes for Jaws. So there's a great movie that actually was made about her, Valerie May Taylor. Her and her husband filmed all of the scenes for Jaws with the great whites down in South Africa. I think what a lot of people don't know though is that the sharks that were filmed are actually a lot smaller than the shark that was then portrayed in the movie. They made everything, all of the set, smaller. The boats that were used, they're all smaller so that the shark seemed bigger and it made it more scary. They also made the shark out to be this massive man-hunting, killing machine that was specifically going after humans and human blood, and that is not at all what happens in real life. We are not part of a shark's diet, and I think a lot of people don't realize that. We're not something that they have in their food web naturally, and we're not something that they technically go for. Mainly, I think what happens when shark attacks do happen is we're either exhibiting behavior that makes us seem like an animal that is injured or wounded, and so the shark sees us as easy bait in that moment, which is why, for example, sometimes surfers do get attacked more because they're splashing and they're making a lot of noise, and that shark sees that then as oh, that whatever that is injured and I can easily go for it. Unfortunately, when a shark takes a bite, when it's a big shark, it does tend to be a big bite and it results in a lot of damage, but that bite is actually a test bite. So sharks tend to get very close to their prey to see if it is something that they do want to eat because they have electroreceptors in their nose area. And they need to get within about a meter of their prey for that to start actually working as a sense, which is why you'll sometimes see sharks exhibiting kind of this like bumping behavior where they'll bump into things to test what that thing is. Or they'll take a test bite. And then, once they've taken that test bite, they tend to leave us alone. But unfortunately, in that case, after that, that test bite obviously does end up in quite a large injury. What we also tend to forget is how little these attacks actually happen. It's a few, select few in a year, whereas we are killing hundreds of thousands of sharks every single year. And I think we've misrepresented them so much in the media that people are just okay with it. And we're not realizing what impact it has on the actual environment because sharks are top predators. They we have these top-down effects from them. If they're lost to an ecosystem, the entire ecosystem is unbalanced. And because we're so disconnected from marine environments, we don't actually see what that does. But in the long term, it'll impact everyone because it impacts fisheries, it impacts different ecosystems, and so in reality, by removing all of these sharks from the environment, we are doing irreparable damage to ourselves as well because it's going to impact how we live. Um, and what we also forget is that they are living beings with a nervous system and feelings, and they do feel pain. I think a lot of people tend to kind of have this narrative that fish don't feel pain, and so it's okay, but they do. A lot of research in the last couple of years has shown that, and so I think these are things that people need to take into consideration when you're far away from a marine environment and you're seeing this and you're thinking, oh well, it's not on me, or oh well, sharks are dangerous monsters anyway. It's a good thing that they're dead. There's so many implications for that, and the environment is getting damaged by it. Um, and at this point, we've done so much damage already that I'm not 100% sure that we can come back from it. And so at the moment, there's a lot of action that needs to be taken to help stop it from going even further to the point where it is really no return.
That was like such a thought-provoking talk that you just had right now. I'm sure a lot of listeners are not going to think about it, have a second thought, oh, we once thought of sharks as monsters, but they're the ones that we need to take care of. Like they're on
Mm-hmm.
the victim side, and we're more like
Yeah.
on the side that we're hurting them. So I really hope that, yeah, we will, as on my part, my perception changed. I learned so much about sharks and the marine ecosystem in general, how we can protect them. And I think this is why we say that there is nothing useless in nature, and everything in nature, the smallest thing is a part, and we don't have to disturb the cycle. Okay, so lastly, any advice for the young people who kind of want to join marine biology or who want to kind of join deep diving research? Any advice for
Mhm.
them?
I will tell you what I wish I had told myself when I was 18 and deciding what bachelor's to do, and that's to just do it. A lot of people, I think, are scared that when they do marine biology, it's going to be too specific, or there's not going to be enough jobs, or they're not going to find a research topic that they really like. And I will admit, I wanted to do my bachelor's in marine biology, but I ended up not doing it because I thought it was too specific, and I thought, oh, what if I don't like it? And I end up with a degree in marine biology, but I actually want to do something terrestrial. And now I wish I could go back and change and start do marine biology from the start, because even if you don't end up liking it, you learn so many skills that are also applicable to terrestrial environments. So it's not, even if you don't end up wanting to work in a marine environment or you don't want to dive, there's always something that you can do. And so I think my advice would be to just go for it. Do that internship that you saw, do that volunteer project that you saw. Um, if you want to go study marine biology, go study marine biology. Nothing should stop you from, if you're interested in that topic and that is something that you want to pursue, go for it. And I wish I had gone for it, but now that I have done my master's in this and I'm doing my master's in this, I'm just happy that I somehow ended up back. And I also would say that it's never too late. I think a lot of people are sometimes scared that maybe because they've done their bachelor's in something that isn't related that they can't switch. But in my course right now, there are so many people that maybe didn't come from a marine biology background that are now doing this master's with me. And so just because you didn't study something related or you think it doesn't work with a master's in that topic, that's not always the case. And I think we forget that a lot of times. You don't need to stick to what you picked when you were 18, 19, 20 for your first degree.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you on that because right now all the subjects are interconnected. No matter where you have studied, even if you have studied economics, even you can still come to marine sciences because you can utilize that knowledge as well there. So everything is interconnected. Okay,
Exactly.
lastly, so here's like a question. It's more of like writing a letter to your future self. So I just want you to say, where do you want to see yourself in like 5 to 10 years? Like what goals you want to achieve?
Ooh, I would like to be working in conservation. I would like to be working with sharks in 5 years. If I'm not, that's okay. My goal is just to be working for a cause that I believe in and something that is going to make the world a little bit better and help us recover what we've damaged. I think that we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, especially in like the environmental fields. And if we're working in conservation, I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves because there are so many issues that we all want to solve. But I think the most important thing is just to take it one step at a time. And so, yeah, I'd be happy just to be working for an organization that I believe in and an organization that's doing, even if it's only doing a little part, I'd be happy with that.
Ah, that's so sweet and so amazing. Okay, so before we wrap up, can you tell where we can find you or where people can connect you?
Yeah, sure. LinkedIn, just my name, or if you want my Instagram, it's ocean and then .giu. So that's my dive Instagram. That's public to everyone. So if you have any questions or anything, go for it. But yeah, those are kind of the two places I use the most, I guess.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, then I there's so much I want to talk about, but again we have a limit. But I definitely learned a lot from you, and I enjoyed it a lot. I'm sure that listeners are going to love it too. Knowing about sharks and knowing about diving and everything, knowing about the underwater world, it's super fascinating, and I'm sure a lot of people might actually find marine biology interesting now. I know I did. So I guess that'll be it for today. Thank you so much, Gilly, for taking out time and being here and sharing all these amazing thoughts with us. It was truly amazing. I'm sure the listeners enjoyed it as well. So towards the end, wishing you a lot of luck for the future, and again,
Thank
huge
you.
respect to you for this amazing job that you're doing, and hope you find a lot more to do here and have a nice rest of your day. So I guess that'll be it.
Thank you.
As for you guys, so this was your host Noveera, and see you soon again with another amazing episode. Until then, bye.